This week on Under the Radar, female empowerment in the form of one group of women deciding what kind of jobs are appropriate for another group of women. So let me get this straight. This is empowering. My body, my choice. Don't tell me what to wear. Fair enough. But this is not empowering. This is demeaning. Now, of course, the problem here is that those 2 points of view come from the same people. The opinions of the women on the right of your screen don't matter. It doesn't matter that they like what they do and they don't feel it's demeaning. Your moral superiors know better. Now, the moral argument here doesn't interest me much because it comes down to subjective opinions. I feel this is demeaning to women, so they shouldn't do it. Here's an example of that type of thinking on a BBC radio show recently over the recent decision to ban the use of so-called Walkon girls at darts competitions in the UK.
Just because somebody is happy to do something does not make it right or valid or appropriate.
Well, why not?
And because I would want our society to strive to become more equal, to become more balanced, and for us to be better educated collectively, to realise that objectifying people based on what they dress or by their gender is just not necessary.
But isn't the key thing, Tilly, that Jade chooses what Jade does, not you?
Well, I would wish for her to be better educated so that she would have a more aspirational choice of what she would like to do with her life.
Notice how she completely dodged the question of freedom of choice, choosing instead the very condescending message that even if you do this of your own free will and you don't feel demeaned in any way, that just means that you're not educated and you need us more educated, morally righteous people to decide what's best for you. Now, I don't watch darts or Formula One, so I don't feel like I'm personally losing out over the banishment of grid girls or darts walk-on girls. I don't know what the value of a walk-on girl is. I've heard arguments that it just adds to the spectacle of what is a predominantly male sport. I've heard more practical arguments about the fact that these girls are a major source of advertising for brands. Makes sense. There's a lot of eyes on them. But surely the more important issue here is simply freedom of choice. If women are freely entering into this type of employment, then what's the problem? One of the typical feminist arguments is that it sends the wrong message to young girls. It might give them body image issues because they can't or don't look like a model. Well, does that mean when we see sportsmen lionize that it gives young boys, especially those that aren't coordinated, ability issues? Is it wrong to notice that some people are just born attractive or are good at sport? Another argument is that it demeans women on the grounds that women are being judged solely on the way they look rather than on their merit. Now, sports people are judged based solely on their sporting ability. Why is that okay? Well, because sport is based on ability. It's a true meritocracy. But whether you like it or not, there's a meritocracy when it comes to attractiveness. That's why you don't see 300-pound walk-on girls. Studies have shown that even congenitally blind men prefer women that have an hourglass figure. Sure, it's not an ability, they are born this way, although staying in shape does require some maintenance. But what about people that are just born smart? Being smart is no guarantee that you'll do well in life, but if you choose to take advantage of your brains, the world is your oyster. Then what's wrong with taking advantage of your natural attractiveness? Another argument made in that same BBC radio segment is that the term girls is demeaning. These are women after all.
I think it's a really sexist event to parade women in this way, and the fact that they're called girls really sums the whole thing up, doesn't it? They're not girls, they're women. They're fully adult women, and it's a male sport, and to parade women in such an objectified way is frankly shocking and unbelievable.
Although apparently girl power is empowering. Hey, the Spice Girls are getting back together, even though these girls are all over the age of 40. But walk-on girls, demeaning and sexist. Perhaps this contradiction has more to do with another argument. That is that this is an out-of-date idea, using women as decorations, adornments for male enjoyment. And this argument makes a lot of sense, because if there's one thing feminists really hate, it's males enjoying themselves. I'll return to this idea of hypocrisy and inconsistency later. Anyway, let's have a look at the official statement from Formula One. Formula One considers the time spent by teams and drivers on the grid before a race as one of celebration, where guests and various performers can add to the glamour and spectacle of the Grand Prix, enabling promoters and partners to showcase their countries and products. Over the last year, we have looked at a number of areas which we felt needed updating so as to be more in tune with our vision for this great sport. While the practice of employing grid girls has been a staple of Formula One Grand Prix for decades, we feel this custom does not resonate with our brand values and clearly is at odds with modern-day societal norms. We don't believe the practice is appropriate or relevant to Formula One and its fans, old and new, across the world. Sounds a lot like a current year argument. But hey, Formula One can do what they like, and if it upsets you enough, then boycott their events. Same goes for darts. Now, returning to hypocrisy and consistency, there's the question of where does it all end? Does it end with removing artwork to provoke conversations about women in art? Are we even allowed to find women attractive anymore? Or are we only allowed to find women attractive in the ways that feminists approve of? This article in The Spectator asks, why is porn okay, but grid girls aren't? Well, I suspect for a lot of feminists, porn isn't okay, but let's slay one monster at a time. Attacking darts is easier than tackling the porn industry, especially when you can piggyback on the latest scandal. From the article, people have always objected to women dressing immodestly, more so women than men. But what I can't understand, and this is the dinosaur brain again, is that the current public moral space has no coherence or consistency. So while Formula One girls are out of date and exploitative, pornography is fine because it's empowering and educational or something, at least according to the increasingly BuzzFeed-like BBC Online. It's okay for singers whose target audience is preteen girls to be crudely sexual and dress half naked as long as they're woke. Ditto films and television being sexually graphic, as long as everyone makes the right vacuous points on Oscar night. Sex work, likewise, is a morally neutral issue because it's empowering, except when it's not. Women enjoying lifestyle choice is good, except when it isn't. And this is a good example of exactly that point. Beyonce is empowering and a role model for young girls. The women on the right are not. What's the difference? Well, because it's mostly young girls that like Beyonce, but the girls on the right are participating in a predominantly male sport and for male enjoyment. And as I said, that's not on. Men aren't allowed to enjoy female beauty. And I think there is one more important angle here that hasn't got as much attention, that this is another example of the increasingly narrow feminist concern for middle to upper class university educated women like themselves. This sentiment was captured by Brendan O'Neill in an article also in The Spectator a few days ago. Feminists have a new target: working class women. O'Neill describes the disconnect of feminism from ordinary people's lives by, for example, focusing on the now debunked claim that women are being systematically underpaid at the BBC. Quote, that these two stories have exploded at the same time and are battling it out for the front pages of the papers. The Guardian has gone for the BBC women's story, Natch, while The Sun is backing the sacked darts women. Tells us a lot about modern feminism, about its now Marie Antoinette levels of disconnection from ordinary people's lives and concerns, about its morphing from a movement that was once concerned with improving the political and working lot of all women into a clique of like-minded upper-middle-class women who might have each other's backs, but certainly don't have the backs of those other women, those less well-off women, those foolish women who think it's acceptable to use one's looks or prowess to make a buck. Those women aren't welcome in this choosy, aloof sisterhood. He goes on, this is the nature of feminism today. It has become a well-off women's racket. It has become a means for educated women to secure their position in the media, business and politics. Witness the new feminism's myopic obsession with the numbers of women on company boards, or the exact ratio of male to female guests on the Today program, or how female MPs are addressed on Twitter. The vast majority of women and men do not work in these fields, of course. Feminism clearly isn't for them. In fact, feminism is very often against them, especially if they are those bad women who take jobs or have points of view that mainstream feminists disapprove of. Those women will be raged against by the sisterhood. It increasingly seems there is one kind of person who irritates the new feminists more than men do. Women who don't think or behave as feminists expect them to. Women who think for themselves. These women will be written off as suffering from internalised misogyny, whether they're voting for Trump or Brexit, or doing jobs that involve wearing revealing clothes, or questioning the sexual harassment panic, or doing something else that the feminist elite disapproves of. These women will be diagnosed as having had their brains warped by the culture. It is the most sexist idea of our times, this notion that certain women cannot think for themselves and thus must be corrected, saved, or possibly condemned by the rich, right-on women in the media and politics. Indeed, the feminist idea of internalised misogyny rehabilitates the old, foul notion that women whose thinking diverges from the mainstream are mad somehow. The universe is barely large enough to contain the irony of this. Well, there's not much more I can add to that, except to say that perhaps there is an upside to all this, and that is that this kind of authoritarian moral policing just further alienates feminism from ordinary people. So I put the question to you, dear listener, is this a feminist own goal, or is it just another casualty of the new Puritan cultural revolution? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.